Hello and welcome to HSMR Chess. A few of you awesome guys have asked me why it seems to always be white that is winning these games I show. It has a pretty simple explanation. That is that white goes first, and that is a pretty big advantage on the highest level. But black can strike, black can win, and I thought it would be nice to give a few example games to show just how quickly actually black can gain the initiative if white messes up just a little bit. So the first game features the legendary Morphy as black against a guy called Amant, and it's not the guy from Chessbra. He did not travel back in time to see if he could defeat Morphy, even though that would have been awesome. It's some French guy. This Amant is some French guy. And he had the white pieces, and he opened with pawn to e4. A move that would later be called best by test by Bobby Fischer. Morphy replied pawn to e5, and as white we immediately attack this pawn with the knight f3. Black defends the pawn in a classical way, knight c6, defending e5. And now it's time to develop the c1 bishop. We can either go to b5, that would be the Spanish opening, or we could do what Amant did and put it on c4, looking at f7. And Morphy, he said, well, that's a mighty good idea, I'll do the same. Bishop c5, looking at f2. This opening, what you see right here, this opening sequence is called the Gyoko piano, and it's still played today. It's a good opening. The way Amant chose to handle it was with c3 here. It's a very typical sort of move that you will see in many king's pawn openings. Very often in the Spanish also, you see this. Morphy replied with knight f6, put the pieces out, and now it's time for white to strike in the center with d4. And this move was nicely prepared with c3. It's now defending this pawn. So that when Morphy takes, like so, he can recapture with a pawn, establishing a really nice pawn formation here in the center with these two guys, just attacking all these squares in black's camp. Also, we are hitting Morphy's bishop here. Can we take him down with the help of some French guy 200 years ago? Can we take Morphy down? What do you think? Well, Morphy thought, I need to do something about this bishop. I cannot capture because d4 is protected twice by the knight and the queen. So he threw this check. And what do we do? did Amant do? How can we meet this check? Well, Amant put the bishop in between here, blocked the check like this. And maybe he was trembling a little bit, sitting opposite Paul Morphy, who was at this point, without a doubt, the strongest player in the world and an absolute legend. So maybe White is just thinking, let's trade off some pieces. Just let's keep it nice and simple, so we don't give Morphy a chance to show his brilliance. And Morphy was actually somehow okay with this. He chopped off the bishop. Bishop takes d2. Check. And Amant recaptured with the knight. Knight takes d2. Like so. And as you can see, we are still enjoying this massive center. We are really taking control of the center here. 2 pawns, d4 and e4, both protected. And we have the nice bishop looking at f7. Morphy, of course, could not allow this. This could not be allowed to stand. So he played d5. And okay, we can work with this. We can capture with e takes d. And even though Morphy can recapture, knight takes d5. We still have more pieces developed, and we have lines of attack. So let's just castle here. Castle to the king side. And now we can maybe put the rook out and give a check, or just gain a lot of action here on the e file. Morphy did not want the check, so he also castled to the king side. And what can we do here as white? What can we do? Well, we have this nice knight, and we don't really want to deal with a pin with bishop to g4, sort of pinning the knight to our queen. So what we could do, and what Amant did, was to play h3, just controlling this square. Unfortunately though, h3 is a target. And when you give Paul Morphy a target, you can expect him to come at you like nothing you can even imagine. Okay, so he played knight to f4. This is attacking the pawn twice because we have the bishop here. And if you can manage to do this in your own games, activate a piece like a bishop or sometimes a rook without moving it, you are getting ahead in tempo. You are getting further than your opponent because you are winning some time there. And that's part of the reason why black was able to start an attack even though white had the first move. So the pawn is attacked here. If it's chopped off with a knight sacrifice, or maybe a bishop sacrifice first, and then we check with the knight, we could come in with the queen here. Black could come in and it would be very dangerous. So it's only defended once, the pawn, by the pawn, but we can play king h2, defending the pawn with the other pawn and with the king. And here Paul Morphy did something that surprised me quite a bit when I saw the game for the first time. He played knight takes pawn. takes d4. And it's recaptured, knight takes d4. And of course, Morphy can now capture with the queen, queen takes d4. And what surprised me about this was not that he would go and win a pawn like this, because a pawn is a pawn, and it's good to be up material, but it seems to me that we are now only attacking with these two pieces. And that was because that the first time I saw the game, I just didn't really realize the power of this bishop here. It is full on developed, it is actively participating in the attack. It doesn't need to move, it just needs to be able to see h3. Here, as white here, what do we want to do? Well, a really nice move could maybe be to play the knight to f3, helping out with the defense of our king and hitting the queen. Unfortunately, that would hang the bishop, and also, even if the bishop moved, Morphy could contemplate exchanging queens, and then he would actually just be up a pawn, and that's not really a position we want to be in. So what can we do? Well, we can try queen to c2. Now we are defending the bishop, and we are not afraid of a queen exchange, because Morphy's queen can no longer see our queen. So knight f3 could be a good move for us now. But Morphy is one of the greatest chess legends of all time. So he found a move. And the move is queen to d6. It's quite clever. It's threatening discovered checks. Whenever we move the knight now, we will be checking the king. Okay. So we as white, of course, can't really allow that. So we play king back to h2. Now there is no discovered check. We are losing a little bit of time with these king moves here. We're not really getting an attack going. And Morphy is, because now Morphy plays queen to h6. And you see 1, 2, 3 attackers on h3 now. Looks very dangerous. For example, we could see bishop takes h3, and when we recapture with the pawn, queen takes h3 is going to be checkmate, king moves, and queen g2 checkmate. So how can we defend this pawn? What can we do to defend the pawn? Amant played queen c3. Nice little move, laterally defending the pawn. But we have to watch the space left behind, as Grandmaster Maurice Ashley reminds us. And when we went off this light square diagonal, we allowed this bishop to come to f5. And we see this move, and we think about, okay, why here? Why f5? We're going to see the explanation in a little bit. The point of this move is actually just to make room for this rook to come to d8. But if we put the bishop on d7, it will block the rook. If we put it on e6, it could be exchanged off, and we need it to attack h3. And if we go to g4, we could run into trouble if the king moves, and we suddenly have to deal with the fact that this pawn can capture our bishop. So Morphy played it to f5. At this point in the game, Amant played something that we would of course not have played, because we have hindsight, and also we don't like to play passive. And here Amant actually played king h2 again, trying to have 3 defenders, 1, 2, 3 of h3. But we would not do that. We know we can't allow a guy like Morphy to have this much time to develop his pieces. And here he just played rook to d8. Looks like a normal positional move. The rook of course belongs here, but it also has an extremely precise tactical point that Amant missed here, because he played rook on a to d1, thinking that he was just going to counter the influence of this rook. And we've been in Amant's shoes, in his head, for most of the game. If you try to enter the mind of Paul Morphy with all that I've sort of said, do you think you can find the solution? How is white winning here? Well, it starts with a sacrifice of the bishop. Bishop takes h3. The king can't of course take. We can't go into check, so he has to be the last piece who takes. But we have 2 other guys. We don't start with the queen, because the knight would take, and that's a bad exchange for us. So we capture with the pawn. Right. So are we winning now? We have this adequately defended, right? It's defended 2 times. It's only attacked 2 times. But of course we see the point of the rook. Rook to d3. And what I think Amant missed here is that in this position, of course, he can't capture with the bishop, because then the queen would no longer be able to see h3, and checkmate would follow on g2. So he had to capture with the queen. But this could be fine actually, because we are getting a rook, knight takes, and a knight, bishop takes, for the queen. And Morphy has already sacrificed 1 piece, so if we look at the material situation, you can see we have 2 rooks, that's 10 points, and then 2 minor pieces, that's 6, so we are at 16 points, 17, 18, 19, 20 points, against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11, 20 points. So maybe the game is kind of equal. Except of course that it's Paul Morphy we are playing, and he has of course calculated this all the way to the end when he started his combination. Can you find the last move? What do you look for when you look for a good move? First, you look for checks. There's a check here, doesn't do much. And then there's a check on d6, and that wins. Check to the king, king goes to h2. He's just been going back and forth a lot. Not a good recipe against Paul Morphy. And then queen takes d3. And at that point, Amant felt that it was time to resign. So that's the first game. And it kind of showed that if black is really active in the opening and white messes around a little bit and wastes some tempi, then you can just be justified in just going for the kill. So, through a little bit of editing magic, We are back at the starting position. We are in 1941 and we have Efimov, old Soviet master, against a young David Bronstein, Soviet chess legend, who was so close to becoming world champion at one point. And here he shows how black can really get at white, and he wins in only 12 moves. Efimov opens with e4, e5 from black, and f4, the king's gambit. Very aggressive system for white, a very romantic system, a system that can backfire. E takes f, this is of course part of the plan for white. Knight f3. And here we see a little bit of an offbeat move from Bronstein. Knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4. But Efimov pushes it forward, attacking the knight, saying, "Are you attacking me? I'm attacking you." And the knight goes to this side of the board. Knight to h5. Some say a knight on the rim is dim. That's generally very good advice. But in this particular position, the knight is doing just fine on the rim. Efimov plays knight c3, getting the horses ready for battle. And Bronstein plays d6, asking a question to the pawn and getting the f8 bishop active. Efimov plays bishop c4. He's pretty aggressive here, and that's the point of this opening. Black plays d takes e, regaining the pawn for a brief moment until knight takes. Knight takes e5. But now the knight has left its job. The job was to guard h4. But, of course, it's coordinating with the bishop on f7. So we are trying to get a fast attack in. But we see a fast attack right back. Queen h4 check to His Majesty. These queen checks are normal in the king's gambit, so we just play king f1. That's the standard plan. Now we are ready to capture on f7 and just get a really strong attack going against black's king. Black can't allow this, so he interposes the bishop. And this is a vintage Bronstein move. Because watch this, white chops the bishop off, bishop takes e6, and Bronstein recaptures with nothing. He doesn't recapture. So if he doesn't recapture, then what was the point of the bishop move? Well, this bishop was looking at e2. It was defending e2. And Bronstein did not like that, because he had this plan. Knight check, knight g3. Let's check. We cannot capture because the pawn is pinned to the rook. Queen takes rook, check. So instead, king g1. But unfortunately, this does not work because we got the bishop away from e2, so we can play bishop c5, check to the king. And now, do you see it? Do we see the point of the bishop sacrifice here on d6? Only one move, really. d4. And the point is that we can sacrifice this bishop. Bishop takes d4. Why? Because there's only one move, really. We could play bishop e3, but bishop takes bishop, checkmate. So queen takes bishop. And with no bishop guarding f2, we have knight to e2, check, and looking at the queen. So we can pick up the queen. And white resigned. But wait, what's that? Is that you guys I can hear saying that, what about the knight? This Efimov guy must be a fool, he can just capture with the knight. The knight was looking at e2. That's true. That's true. But there's a small problem with that. That is that queen to e1 is checkmate. And that is how you beat white in 12 moves. I hope this video brought a little relaxation to you. I hope you liked the chess aesthetics and the tapping sounds and the clickety-clack of the pieces. And I hope that I will see you